Hello, how you doing? Happy November. Yeah, the month just began. We're on the 5th, and it's exciting to know, there's a lot of newness in a new month. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of beautiful things ahead in this new month. So as I claim them, I hope you claim them too. So today I want to talk about restoration, in line with that, recovering all. And so I went into the Bible and I found this passages of verses about David, a time when he'd come back from different assignments. And he found that the Amalekites, the notorious Amalekites, I think in the Bible, when you think about the different armies who attacked the people of God, the Amalekites really feature quite a number of times. I wouldn't want to meet them. So they really terrorize the people of God, and in this juncture they'd actually come and taken away a lot of spoils from David and his community, and on top of that had taken David's 2 wives. David is a special man, so we all know his his different adventures, for lack of a better word. And it's always a reassurance that it doesn't matter where we are coming from, where we are going, but if God has his eyes on us and has an assignment for us, he will fulfill it. And in many instances, he fulfilled those assignments with David, despite his his nature, his human nature, actually, because all the things he did which were not pleasing to God were because he was mere human. But the thing about David is, even despite all this, he always came back to God. He obeyed, he listened, he sought counsel, he sought forgiveness. So let me read from Samuel. It's Samuel 30, 1 Samuel 30. And you can read, the title is David's victory over the Amalekites. So I read the entire passage, but I'll read for you about 3 specific verses between 1 Samuel 30 verse 1 to 20. I'll just seek out based on that small preamble I've given. He came home, there was disaster courtesy of Amalekites. What did he do? What was the outcome? So when he came back home, we see that David, let me just maybe pick it up from what he found. When David and his men came to the town, it was burned, and their wives and their sons and their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they were too exhausted to weep any longer. Now David's 2 wives had been captured, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. Further, David was greatly distressed because the people spoke of stoning him, for all of them were embittered, each man for his sons and daughters. But David felt strengthened and encouraged in the Lord his God. Even despite the fact that people were for some reason blaming him, because he's their man. It's his job to protect them, to make sure that the notorious Amalekites don't come and wreak havoc in his land. But he, in that verse 6, David felt strengthened and encouraged in the Lord his God. Then the Bible further says, verse 7, David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, please bring me the ephod. So Abiathar brought him the ephod. David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue this band of raiders? Will I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue. This is God answering David. Pursue, for you will certainly overtake them, and you will certainly rescue the captives. So it was after, only after seeking God did David decide, hey, I'm going to go after these Amalekites, and we're going to recover what they've taken away from us. And, all that happens, and they go and they have this 300 type of war with the Amalekites. And then at the end, 17, we hear that then David and his men struck them down in battle from twilight until the evening of the next day, and not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who rode camels and fled. So David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken and rescued his 2 wives. Nothing of theirs was missing, whether small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything that had been taken. David recovered it all. So David captured all the flock and herds which the enemy had, and the people drove those animals before him and said, this is David's spoil. So that is 1 Samuel 30. And as I say, the title is David's victory over the Amalekites. And then for the thing about, I think when I read that passage and those specific verses and just that story in general, I think when you think about recovering all, it's just not a matter of waking up and saying you'll recover all in the wake of maybe disaster, trouble, problems. Like when I look at what David did, like he came back, and number one, everybody was blaming him. He came back and he himself was, there was trouble in his house. It's not just that they didn't touch his house. His people had been taken, his wives had been taken. But the people were blaming him for what had happened. And there was that threat they wanted to stone him. They were really mad. They'd wept, they'd cried. But even despite everyone kind of turning against him, he paused. He was like, he had strength from the Lord. He still felt encouraged enough by the Lord despite the disaster. So much so, he was like, he paused. He was still for a while, and it was like he sought God's counsel, and he was like, God, what do I do in this instance? Give me direction. Do I go after the Amalekites? What do you say? I can imagine that conversation that, they're having this discourse dialogue with God, and God is like, I give you directive, I give you permission, I direct you to go after them, and I promise you, you will recover. You will recover whatever they've taken away from you. And I don't know if it's human nature to, in the midst of disaster and strive to like pause and be like, God, what do I do? For one, I don't think every time I pause and do that. Sometimes you just act on impulse, and you follow through what you need to do because you're being reactive. And I think it's a really big lesson to learn from David, that he paused. I think for me, when I look back at that story, is the fact that in the midst of the deepest trouble, he just paused and asked for guidance. He did not trust his capacity as a ruler, as a leader of an army. He didn't do that. He trusted God, his directive and direction, and God reassured him. And truly, indeed, God, at the end of it all, whatever he said, he kept his promise. And when I come back to living our everyday life, and stuff happens and we seek directive, sometimes you won't get directive to go ahead. You'll get directive to pause, and maybe the pausing means that you watch everything crumble and you find a plan B. And I feel, if it doesn't go David's way, where you're told to go and you're going to succeed, and you're told don't go, wait for the storm to pass, that's like a very interesting, weird place to be. But when you think about it, it's still restoration. I feel restoration is not in the outcome per se. Restoration is in being still and being encouraged and strengthened in the Lord, that whatever happens, you'll be able to come out onto the other side stronger. Yeah. So I think when I read that, I kind of went back to a film I watched last year about Napoleon. And my history is a bit, I don't know, rusty, but yeah, there's a famous war that Napoleon lost. Like, he was like on a winning streak. And in the 1800s, he decided to lead an army towards Russia. They were having some disagreements. And when he led this army, like, when I think of Napoleon from the film, like, he was a bit of an arrogant person, and he was winning. So, like, I think sometimes, yeah, he wasn't listening. So he led an army, like it said, like it was almost a million troops to Russia. And when they went to Russia, like, they were blindsided, because when they went there and they arrived in Moscow, and it was like a long journey. They arrived and Moscow had been, number one, abandoned, like guys had left, and then they burned up the entire place, meaning it was a strategy in war. When you burn up the place, you're burning everything, resources, food, livestock. Like, when the armies came, there was nothing to eat. Like, the ground was scorched. I think it's called scorched ground strategy. And they didn't have food. And the worst of it was like in the middle of the worst winter. And if Russia, Moscow, like they experience winter like never before. So by the time they were, like, they arrived, no one was there. Like, the war never happened. Yes, but because of the adverse weather conditions and the lack of food, by the time they're trying to go back, Napoleon lost almost all his army. And yeah, and I feel like sometimes the question is, who do you want to be? Do you want to be arrogant like Napoleon, if I could use that example, or do you want to seek God like David did? Yeah, so yeah, wishing you a lovely day, evening, afternoon, and enjoy the rest of the month. So I don't know if you can hear, like, where I'm located, don't ask me why. Like, there's a shooting range karibu, and like once in a while, like, I don't know if they practice or what they do. So in relation to this, the meditation today, I think it makes sense when you think about, waging war, and just instead of going guns blazing, just pausing a bit and listening to what God has to say, pulling strength from Him, asking Him to encourage you. And nothing in life is easy. It might not be easy to follow the direction He gives you, because maybe it's not going out into the war. It's probably just sitting back and letting things settle down. But God always gives you strength. So yeah, that's it from me. I hope your journey with God, with reading the Word, is improving day after day. Yeah, have a lovely day and be blessed. Bye.